Nonette, I'm so happy that you're here, and I followed your lead on summoning our grandmothers and grandfathers and our ancestors to do this panel. It always makes it easier. So maybe you can start by introducing yourself to the whole audience that's here today.
Greetings, everyone. Good afternoon. And whoever's watching in your time zone, good day. I am Nonette Royo. I am the Executive Director of the Tenure facility, an organization that helps get land rights to indigenous peoples and local communities in tropical rainforests of the world, especially in tropical Asia, the Congo Basin, and the Amazon Basin. And indigenous peoples and local communities, when they get their land rights, are able to protect forests, their homes, and therefore protect nature and forests for us. That's where I come from, yes.
And also, I'd like for you, Jennings, from Health and Harmony, to introduce yourself.
Thank you, Nora. And I just want to express my deep gratitude to everyone who's involved with this panel. It's very humbling for me to be up here with you. Nonette has been a friend, a mentor, and advisor to our founder, Dr. Kennery Webb, and to me for many years. And it's just an extraordinary pleasure and humbling for me to be here. Health and Harmony is a 15-year-old planetary health organization founded on the understanding that we have never lived in a world where the health of people, the health of ecosystems, and the health of the planet could be addressed in silos. Our mission is to reverse the loss of tropical rainforests on planet Earth in order to curb global heating and the climate crisis. And when it comes to knowing how best to guard and steward Earth's tropical rainforests, I'm not the expert. My colleagues aren't the experts. The experts are the people who live in these forests, the indigenous peoples, the traditional peoples, and the local rainforest communities, the people of the place. So we enter these rainforest communities, and we conduct a methodology called radical listening, which I can talk about in a few minutes, but it's an anti-colonial approach. It does more than just seek free, prior, informed consent. We seek to be guided precisely by the wisdom of indigenous, traditional, and local communities.
Thank you, Jonathan. While we were preparing, which is something that I like to mention in the panels that I get to organize, is that there's a lot of preparation and a lot of talks that happened before. And Nonette, you and I, we spoke of very many different aspects of your work. One of them is reparation. Can I use that word?
Yes.
And so within that scope, the Tenure facility has established a wide program. Can you just tell us more about how it's articulated in the region that you work?
Yeah, what is really important for us to remember is that the world's tropical rainforest right now, 1/3 of it is intact, 1/3 of it is highly degraded, and 1/3 of it's lost. And when we talk about climate change, the trees that we're talking about that will help us through climate change are the standing trees, the standing forests that we have right now, and the guardians of those 1/3 are the indigenous peoples and local communities. And they have been doing this for hundreds of years. And when you talk about this reparation, it's actually a recognition of what they have already done and are currently delivering at the risk of their own lives and their cultures and their families. And this is where the Tenure facility is helping. We are proactively providing the funding and technical assistance to assist in expanding the mapping and delineation and demarcation, as what the Minister Eloy was saying, of these territories, so that the governments who said they are recognizing these rights can deliver the action that's needed for it. Because there's been a lot of words saying we recognize in the international instruments, in the commitments to climate change, commitments to biodiversity, but the action is very, very little. So the reparation we're talking about here is the grants, the funding, that's channeling directly to them, to indigenous peoples and local communities, is what we are doing. So we translate that to grants and technical assistance, and they are not small. They are not just $3,000, $50,000. It's actually large, and it's large because they have done so much, and they're only getting very little. So it's $1 million a year for every organization. We're committing to longer term for them, 5 years to 10 years. And that's for the tropical rainforest, indigenous peoples, and local communities that are still in active guardianship and stewardship of the forests.
And like you said, reparation and recognition are fundamental tools and necessary to benefit all of us in the process.
Yes.
And I like to really focus on the words that we use when we try to express ourselves, and especially since the panel, we've titled it Indigenous Voices, so reparation, recognition. And then there's something you work with, you're fundamentally working with, radical listening. Maybe you can tell us what it is in the scope of your work. And I also think that for our audience, it's really interesting to put it into context, because radical listening can be applied to so many other sectors of our lives and our society. But please, Jonathan.
Thank you. Let me start by saying it's radical for a few reasons. Number one, because the societies that I come from haven't typically listened. Number two, when we listen, we are committed to investing precisely in the intersectional systems-oriented solutions that rainforest communities themselves design. Again, they are the experts. They know best what they require to protect and expand our tropical rainforests. The radical listening exercise starts with a very simple question. And I would like for you to hear the anti-colonial mindset in this question, and I would like for you to appreciate something of the ethos of reciprocity in this question. The radical listening exercise starts by saying, you are the guardians of a massive rainforest that is so valuable to the health of this planet and to the health of any Homo sapien, any person, and any species that lives on this planet. How might the world community assist you to guard your rainforests as a thank you for guarding this rainforest? It's so essential for us to understand that the health of a rainforest half a world away impacts my health, my family's health, whether I live in Paris, Geneva, Nairobi, Johannesburg, Tokyo, etc. And so radical listening, again, we are committed to being guided by and investing precisely in their wisdom. No preconceived notions, no judgment, no kit of solutions that we arrive with, no idea of the problems that we perceive, but listening and then following their guidance and transferring wealth, transferring resources back into these communities whom we so desperately need, and by we I mean humanity, we so desperately need to be leading us out of this climate crisis and out of the biodiversity crisis.
And I'd like to emphasize again that this panel, like other panels that we co-create with Change Now, with Who Cares, we have one on human rights where we also have Indigenous voices speak on their rights. But these panels are panels that we'd like to have every year, because we feel, obviously we feel very strongly the underrepresentation of Indigenous voices. And why they matter is because we're in danger of losing so much knowledge and so much wisdom that can actually accelerate the turnaround that we need to have for our planet. And by the work that you do, you're trying to extract and preserve, extract in the right sense of the term, not the one that we use usually with the planet. We're trying to create and get back to the knowledge that we are in the danger of losing. As an example, a lot of the languages that are making the cloth of Indigenous people in all continents, I myself am trying to learn the Indigenous language of my grandmother, and it's such a process because obviously it's a new thing, but you are doing so much, and maybe you can just tell us more about this, and maybe Nonette, can you complement that, about this body of ways of being that we need to apply to nature today that we have available, we're just not listening, or we're not, but you are.
Well, I'm learning how to, and doing as much as we can. So I am formerly an ecologist, and what I'm about to say may be somewhat provocative. I hope not. I mean, no disrespect by it, and I certainly don't want to generalize and dehumanize indigenous peoples. But my sense is that there is a subset of our Homo sapien species who have not developed a conceit to see us as existing apart from nature, but to understand that we are of nature. We are because of nature. We are one species in the animal kingdom. We are one species on the ecosystems that we inhabit. And our very existence and our well-being depends on the integrity of these ecosystems. And by and large, when you look at indigenous cultures, traditional peoples, indigenous peoples, they haven't developed this conceit to see themselves as apart from nature. So not only do we need to listen to them and understand how to protect these biodiverse and climate-critical tropical rainforest ecosystems, but I would also submit to you that as humans, we need to adopt something of their ethos when it comes to life in general and obviously ecosystems worldwide.
Nonette, I'd like to ask you this question. When we prepared for this panel, again, I mentioned something that I mentioned earlier, which is the concept and the workshop that we provide, which is the concept of environmental intelligence. And I insist because there's a lot of talk about AI, artificial intelligence, but I think the fundamental, the one that we should really be focusing on is environmental intelligence, which is what indigenous people have mastered over millennia, and that we in Western communities and developed world, we are in the danger, we're losing every single minute, every time we go about our days, and every time there's the introduction of a new technology that's super sexy and super attractive, and social media and this, there's so many things moving at the speed of light, and the opposite is the speed of life, which is the intelligence of nature. So I think environmental intelligence is what we try to teach, is to, I'm not saying we shouldn't have phones and cars and all that stuff. The concept of environmental intelligence is to marry indigenous wisdom from millennia and to create technology from the prism of indigenous wisdom and not have it completely forgotten in the shuffle. Is there something within your work that you could share with us, and I know there is, that is an example of environmental intelligence that you'd like to share with our audience? Something that you've observed, that you know as an indigenous person that you'd like to share with us so that they can take it with them and start applying it in daily lives?
There are two things that I experienced growing up. And this has been well written also in a book of Tyson Yunka Porta called Sand Talk. He's an Aborigine writer that is very prominent, and that is the mind and the heart connection enhanced by something else, and that is the spirit. And the spirit is very, very alive in indigenous peoples and local communities, indigenous peoples. And you will know this when you join ritual and welcoming and thanking. And this morning, the welcoming of the ancestors. The intelligence of nature. How long did we exist? 3.8 billion years. Is ingrained in the practices passed from generation to generation by indigenous peoples. Now, we touch our hearts and right now remember, why is it that we love being with nature? At some point when in our ancestors' lives, we were all taught by nature. So this intelligence is very present in the communities we work with right now. And what it is observing patterns where hands connect with hearts and mind and spirit. And this teaches in ways that are not fast, but long-term. Yes. So the current AI, as we experience it, disconnects us. And this is something of an awareness that we all know now. The connection and the integrity of indigenous peoples in nature is what I think is what holds them together despite the challenges in the territories. Traditional knowledge holds them together. And that traditional knowledge is in observing patterns, looking at how water, when it comes through, is going to be accessed when it's in dry season, and to avoid the dangers of being flooded when it's rainy season. So just practical knowledge like that. The respect of spirit, the taking only of what you need and not taking too much and leaving something for the next generation. And then the neighbors, the practical things, don't take too much because we're harvesting from nature. Neighbors need it. Tomorrow we need it. We don't want to destroy. That's just an example.
Thank you, Nonette. And maybe you can share one that you've observed that's useful for your day-to-day in Seattle.
I try, this is very personal.
And sorry, you are in Seattle, right?
Well, I'm in the Columbia River Gorge, just outside of Portland, Oregon.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah. With my children, I am doing my best to introduce them to indigenous knowledge and wisdom. And that is not easy for me to do because I don't know how to do it without appearing I sometimes don't know how to do it without appearing disrespectful or appropriating. And I'm trying to find something in my ecological understanding that bridges that, I don't know if it's cultural or intellectual, I'm not sure. But at Health and Harmony's work alongside rainforest communities in Brazil, Madagascar, in the Congo Basin, in Indonesia, a lot of us in this room are thinking about the UN Sustainable Development Goals, carbon, biodiversity. The proof of concept that we published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences is a Western scientific demonstration of the bounty of return on investment that these communities can give back to you and the planet. I won't go into the details, but when you invest in indigenous knowledge, indigenous wisdom, you render the UN Sustainable Development Goals, those siloed goals, somewhat obsolete, if I might say, because the return on investment in their wisdom is across all aspects of life.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I'm just really inspired about the word wisdom all the time, and I think I'd like to also emphasize on one thing. It's not, we want to feel when we express what Indigenous voices should be, is that they should be included in all discussions. And what we've observed over the years is that when there's a project within a certain community and it's being decided by everyone but the Indigenous people, that's where those projects go wrong. That's where they are not sustainable. I mean, I don't love the word sustainable. I really like to use the word regenerative. But it is fundamental to get everyone at the table. And Nonette and you, how on your day-to-day work are you managing to get some space for these voices to be heard?
Yes, thank you. That's the core of the work we do. We know that Indigenous peoples live in remote areas and they are invisible, right? So it is hard to come forward and represent them if you don't have, in any of the members of the community, don't have something to show that they are the occupants of that particular territory. So they have for years we have done this work with government, invest in making sure the evidence of their existence and management of the territories are very much palpable and it's in their hands. The map of their territory, and when they have the map of their territory and their governments recognize this is in accordance with law, as they had said they have a law to recognize, like especially in Brazil, then they can be at the table making decisions for what could happen and will be allowed and will not be allowed in the land. So that's the power of being at the table, right? Influencing. Now, if that doesn't happen and if they have been ignored, they go to court. And the reason for going to court is here. It says this. Now, there is something that we need to understand in owning collective land. The indigenous peoples, in their values, belong to the land. We belong to the land. We cannot own something that outlives us. Nobody owns nature. We are part of nature. And when we have this title, it is because the language of the law, the language that protects, is the language of ownership, right? If I don't have a paper for my house and my land, I can't go to court and say, hey, you cannot grab that, you Mr. X coming to my house, grabbing my land. No, I cannot, you cannot go. I have here an evidence. They have to use the same language we use. Indigenous peoples to say, this we own. Do not do anything here. Come talk to us. We will tell you where you can and where you cannot. It's sacred in some of these places.
Absolutely.
It's so important. And that's why we do the work we do, because we need to talk. And if we talk real terms. We talk rights. We talk, can you, can't you? What is consent? What is FPIC? We talk everywhere here. We talk FPIC, consent, free and prior informed consent. What is that if we don't have evidence of what it is, where we occupy, where we take our soy of food, where we protect our forests, where it's sacred? It's in the map. Now, we do not actually want to say we own this thing. We are owned by it. But we are forced to make this statement to be able to inform others and to have a peaceful conversation about what can we and can't we do as human beings addressing our needs in this planet.
Thank you, Nonette. Thank you so much for this. Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to welcome another person on stage, but I would like to really thank you so much. I'm very grateful for you to be here today. And you just combined everything that we need, which is knowledge and listening. And I hope that you'll take those two words to create the reparation that we need. Thank you. Thank you.